Thank you, Ashley. And thank you, Andrew Coffin, a Grove City College graduate. I think Andrew was maybe in my first class that I taught at Grove City College back in 1997. Literally, right? I think he was. And thank you to Pat Coyle as well, Ron Robinson, who's not here, but the Young America's Foundation longtime executive director. And thank you for all that you do for young people, for campuses across the country, and for conserving and preserving the Reagan Ranch and Reagan legacy. Now, Ronald Reagan and Reagan conservatism was about conserving and preserving as well. So that's something, more on that in a minute. But also, too, thanks to C-SPAN for being here. People often call C-SPAN and they say, thank God for C-SPAN. Well, I echo that. I mean, there's not many sources out there as objective as C-SPAN. They just put it out there, unedited, no commentary, let it speak for itself. And there's so many talks like this that go on all around the country, thousands of times a year. And I'll often, when I'm at sub, I'm going to say, if there could just be a camera here to capture this and record it and broadcast it. And only C-SPAN does that. So much appreciated. My topic today, what is a Reagan conservative? And as Ashley said, it's based on my new book, 11 Principles of a Reagan Conservative. And this question, what is a Reagan conservative? You hear, if you do a Google search right now, or the last time I did a Google search on it, on the words Reagan conservative, it came up with over 30 million hits, all right, of different people trying to define it and what exactly it means. And a lot of that is because so many Republican candidates, statewide, local races, nationwide, presidential candidates, they will say over and over again when asked what they believe, they'll say, well, I'm a Reagan conservative, right? But what is that? And I think in many cases they say this not so much because maybe they even necessarily totally know what a Reagan conservative is, but many of them want to emulate Reagan's political success, Reagan's political appeal. Think about this. Here was a man in 1980 who won 44 out of 50 states against an incumbent president, 44 out of 50 states. I mean, one of the reasons I think that Jimmy Carter does so much is this lingering sense of rejection that he must have in 1980. I mean, it's a good heart, too. I don't want to belittle that. But I mean, think about that. For an incumbent president to lose 44 out of 50 states. In 1984, Reagan was reelected by winning 49 out of 50 states. And the only state that he didn't win was Minnesota, which was the home state, right, of his challenger, Walter Mondale. And so Reagan twice won states that the Republicans today can only dream of winning. Won California twice, won New Jersey twice, won Massachusetts twice. And people are laughing. They're thinking, hey, that's just ridiculous. No way this could ever happen again. My home state of Pennsylvania, he won twice. The second election, he won the Electoral College by a vote of 525 to 13. So there was no need to recount Florida in that race. The combined Electoral College margin in these two presidential races was 1,014 to 62. All right, so what Republican wouldn't want to be like Reagan in that sense? And if you think about it too, Ronald Reagan, his presidency, it's not just that he got elected, but when he left office with the highest presidential approval ratings of any president since Eisenhower, the highest Gallup approval of any president since Eisenhower. And if you go before Reagan, so he replaces a president who fails to get reelected, an incumbent who loses. That was Jimmy Carter. Prior to Carter was Gerald Ford, who never won a presidential election. Then prior to that, you had Richard Nixon, who of course resigned in disgrace. Prior to that, LBJ, whose presidency went so bad that he declined to even pursue his party's renomination for president. LBJ replaced a president who was killed in office. If you go back before Eisenhower, Harry Truman talked about the presidency like the Great White Jail. a prisoner of the presidency. Truman had the highest disapproval rating of any president basically until George W. Bush. Go back to the 20s, Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson's presidency, 2 terms, ended in despair. He had 2 or 3 strokes in the final 18 to 24 months of his presidency. Now go after Reagan. George H.W. Bush got elected in 1988, largely because, as anybody in here over 30 would remember, largely because it was the best people could do, they thought, to get a 3rd term of Reagan, right? He won 1 term. That was it. He lost in 1992 to Bill Clinton. Clinton wins with 43% of the vote, roughly. That was it. Because of the third-party candidacy of who? Ross Perot. Clinton in 96 didn't get over 50% of the vote. 2000, George W. Bush gets in without even winning a majority of votes. And then 2004, the second Bush term, Bush leaves office. Bush around 2007 had the worst Gallup approval numbers of any president since Harry Truman. Barack Obama. Obama wins in 2008. 2012, Obama actually is the first president in history. By the way, he was the first Democrat, I believe since LBJ, to get over 50% of the vote. But in 2012, he was elected with first president to do this, elected with less popular votes and electoral college votes in his reelection. Reagan won 49 out of 50 states in his reelection. Obama won 26, a bare majority. And if you look at a map of counties, all right, under Reagan it was a sea of red. Under Obama it was still a sea of red. If you look at counties. And speaking of Obama, there was a poll done in 2013, after the second inaugural, which asked Americans if Ronald Reagan were to run today against Barack Obama, who would you vote for? They said Reagan by 58% over Obama. And that's right after Obama's reelection in 2013. Here's really fascinating. How was Obama elected? Principally, the youth vote, right? The youth vote. That same poll, they asked people ages 18 to 34, who would you vote for, Reagan or Obama? They picked Reagan. Unlike the Gallup does a President's Day poll every President's Day, annual President's Day poll. They've been doing this 13 times since 2001. Reagan placed first among the American public as far as the question, who's your all-time favorite president? Reagan got it in 2001, 2005, 2011, 2012. And Reagan usually finishes in the top 3. Typically beats Lincoln. Imagine that. There was in June 2005 a poll done by AOL and Time Warner, AOL Online, which surveyed Americans, and they didn't give them a choice. They asked them to put in whichever name they wanted. Who is the greatest American of all time? Not who's the greatest president. Who's the greatest American of all time? 2.4 million people responded, which any statistician will tell you is far and away a representative sample. I mean, you only need maybe 500 people to do some of this polling. And Reagan won, greatest American of all time. So, what Republican wouldn't want to be like Reagan, right? Who wouldn't aspire to that success? You now have Republican groups all over the country, county, state groups. They've been holding these annual Lincoln Day dinners for years. They've been changing the names of many of those to Reagan Day dinners because the Lincoln Day dinners were in February, which is the month of President's Day and Lincoln's birthday, and February is also the month of Ronald Reagan's birthday. And so now many of these Republican groups, they have, in a sense, Reagan replacing Lincoln, of all things. All right, so I get asked all the time by media people and others, which candidate is the most like Reagan? Where would Reagan stand on this issue or that issue? And this begs the question then of what did Ronald Reagan believe? This